The next reading will talk about futures, markets and contracts. Please note that conceptually forwards and futures are exactly the same. It is the same agreement. The payoff is calculated in the same way. The value to the long, the value to the short, all the calculations that we did for forward contracts remain exactly the same. The problem with forward contracts at times is that forwards are over the counter contracts. That is, any two counterparties can come in and enter the contract. Now, because the contract is for an exchange in the future, today it's just an agreement on paper. No exchange theoretically needs to happen. At a time in the future is when the obligation sets in. Is there a risk that at expiration the counterparty in loss may default on its obligation? So the default risk is a very serious risk in forward contracts, and the default risk is exacerbated because there is not much standardization. For example, there is a commodity forwards and I agreed to long 100 kgs of rice. Now when the expiration comes, the quality of rice delivered to me was much lesser than the quality that we agreed on. So he may not have defaulted, but he would have delivered something that we didn't agree upon, and there can be a dispute on that. So what futures does, or what futures contract do, is that first of all they eliminate the problem of credit risk by setting up a clearing house or a central clearing house, and then imposing a margin requirement. That is, whether you are long or whether you are short, whether you are in the money or you are out of the money. To begin with, everybody will have to put up something called as initial margin. Let's say 20% of the notional value, let's say $100, is what you have to put in with the clearinghouse or with the exchange as an initial margin. As you come in the money, you can take some of this margin back. As you go out of the money, you would have to put up more margin. But at any point in time, the exchange has some extra money kept with himself, so that even if you default, he can settle the contract himself and pay the gaining counterparty whatever his gain is from this margin. If you are losing more, he will ask you to put up more margin, so at any point in time he has enough money to settle the contract. The futures are marked to marketed daily. That is, the calculation that we did, F2 minus F1 upon the present value, is done daily to calculate the value of the long and the value of the short. And depending on how much you are out of the money, you will be having to put up more margin, and if you're in the money, you can withdraw some of your margin. So because this calculation is done daily, it's very much like the stock market. That is, if I purchase a stock today for $100, I may not be selling it tomorrow. But if the stock has gone to 120, my mark to market gain is $20, or a notional gain of $20 is there. Similarly, in futures contracts, we can calculate this mark to market gain or this notional gain. And then because it is through a regularized exchange, there is anonymity of trades. The counterparty for me will always be the exchange. The counterparty similarly for the seller will always be the exchange, and the exchange ensures by way of this margining and additional margining requirements that the trades are all settled. So offsetting the trade is very, very easy. Unlike a forward contract where I may have longed with one counterparty. Now to offset that trade or exit that trade, I have to find a short counterparty who I can short with. So that problem doesn't happen in futures because all counterparties are the exchange. So the major difference between forwards and futures is this, that is, there is a clearinghouse, there is margining, and then to avoid the dispute that I mentioned of the quality of rice, there is also standardization. So the clearinghouse or the exchange determines the contract and what is deliverable and what has to be delivered, and everybody has to follow that. Assume the spot price of gold is $1050 per ounce, that the 1 year futures price is $1200, and that the investor can borrow or lend funds at 10%. Ignore transaction and storage costs. Calculate the arbitrage profit. So the spot price is given to be $1050. Let's assume we work with 1 ounce of gold, such that the fair forward price at the end of 1 year can be determined as 1050 into 1 plus 0.1 to the power 1, because 10% is the annual rate, which comes out to be $1155. Now for some reason we see that the observed futures price is $1200 in the market, or in the market people are longing the futures or longing gold one year forward at the price of $1200. That means there is an arbitrage opportunity available. Two things can happen, or two possibilities exist. Either the gold is overvalued in the future, that is, this 1200 is wrong and this 1200 will come down to 1155, or gold is undervalued in the spot, or this 1150 will go up to about 1100 such that this 1200 can be justified. So either the spot has to go up or the forward has to come down, otherwise there will be an arbitrage opportunity that can be exploited, as we will explain. Now for exploiting any arbitrage anywhere, the first step is to identify something as cheap or expensive. So in this example we can identify that gold is expensive in the forward, rather futures. Now please note, expensive in the futures is always relative. It is relative to the spot, because if the spot is 1050, then the futures should only be 1155, or you can say it is cheap in the spot. If the spot was 1100, then it wasn't expensive. 1200 would have been 5. Oh, fine. So either it is expensive in the futures or it is cheap in the spot. The principle is simple: buy cheap, sell expensive. So that's what cash and carry arbitrage is. Long the spot, short the forward. Remember, an arbitrager doesn't bring any money from his own pocket and still makes a profit. Hence his return on investment is infinite. His return on equity is infinite. He doesn't bring in any of his own money and he's still able to make a profit. So to long 1 ounce of gold, how much money do we need? $1050 in the spot. We'll borrow this much from a bank. The rate of interest is given to be 10%. So we'll borrow and we'll purchase it and we'll sell it in the forward. We'll sell it in the forward at what rate? 1200, because that is the observed market rate today. So long spot and short forward. So I borrow 1050 and when I sell it in the forward I will get $1200. So minus 1050 plus 1 ounce, and here I sell that ounce and I receive $1200. Of this $1200 I had also done a borrowing of $1050 at t equal to 0. So I'll have to return that borrowing with interest of 10%, which will be $1155, giving me an arbitrage profit of $45. With 1 million ounce I could have made $45 million. Theoretically, the profit on such a strategy is infinite. However, these discrepancies generally don't exist forever, as people keep longing the spot and shorting the forward. Long will start to go up and forward will start to come down, so the arbitrage vanishes. So this is an example of cash and carry arbitrage, where we long the spot and short the forward. Basically, spot is cheap and forward is expensive. Assume gold is priced at $1050 and that the 1-year futures price is $1100 per ounce, and that the investor can lend or borrow funds at 10%. Ignore transaction and storage costs. Calculate the arbitrage profits. So exactly the same question, just a different futures price now. So at t equal to 0, the price is 1050. At t equal to 1100, or rather t equal to 1, the price is, or the observed price for longing at t equal to 1 is 1100, whereas the fair price we have computed should be 1155. So now we can see that either it is expensive in the spot or it is cheap in the forward, because with the current stock price, the forward price at a 10% rate of interest should be 1155. So in this case, again, we will long the cheap, short the expensive. So it is expensive in spot and cheap in the future or the forward. So long future, short spot. If we short spot, that is we borrow and short, we would receive $1050 today. The $1050 we can invest at the rate of 10% for 1 year. This is what the short spot will do. So we get $1050 and we invest it in the bank and we'll get 10%. But to short, we would have borrowed. So we would have borrowed 1 ounce of gold, sold it and received 1050. We have to return this borrowing. So 1 year later, we will long the gold again, or we'll get back this 1 ounce by paying $1100, because today itself we short, or we rather long the future at $1100. So from our bank, we will get 1050 into 1.1, that is 1155. Of this 1155, we will pay 1100 to get this 1 ounce of gold. We will still be left with $55, and this ounce that we got, we will return to the person we borrowed it from, or the lender. We are assuming no borrowing costs in this example. So assuming no borrowing costs, we can see an arbitrage profit of $55. This is called reverse cash and carry arbitrage, whereas when you long futures and short spot. Cash and carry arbitrage is when you long spot and short futures.